Welcome to the farm, an oyster farm. Here, where the freshwater Choptank River flows into the salty bay, is where you'll find Choptank Oyster Company. Kevin and his partners hand-raise close to 2 million oysters each year.
What shellfish?
That care begins here at the hatchery, where the oysters grow from microscopic larvae into these tiny creatures called spat.
There's probably 1,000 oysters in that hat.
That's right. What looks like a handful of wet sand is actually thousands of oysters attached to bits of broken shell. After about 3 weeks, they're transferred onto these boxes made from window screens. They'll grow to about the size of a quarter and then be moved to these floats right on the bay, as many as 10,000 in each one.
We grow them for half a summer, then we pull them out, we split them, tumble them, and put them back into bags at a lower level. So we'll put them back in at maybe 5,000. And that process continues over 2 years until they're large enough to harvest.
Even after 2 years, some oysters are still too small. They're separated and put back in the water. The harvested oysters are then taken to a facility close by, where they're washed and packed into boxes destined for stores and restaurants all over Maryland.
What's going on, Kevin? What's going on, Travis?
Some customers, like Travis Todd, can't wait for delivery. They take them right off the dock. Travis is the third generation of the Todd family at the Ocean Odyssey restaurant. They've been serving local seafood since 1947.
It's a really clean, vibrant, I mean, it just tastes like nature, you know? What I really like about it is the fact that this is our local and native oyster, yet it's being grown rather than just harvested in the wild. What we have is some rendered bacon, and keep the fat. You're going to add to that fat, you're going to add onion and garlic.
Today, Travis is making Oysters Bobafeller, a variation on the famous Oysters Rockefeller. Cracked pepper, lemon juice, heavy cream, arugula, and Parmesan cheese. All mixed and baked into cheesy goodness.
As soon as you bread these things, you want to get them in the fryer.
For something different, how about a po' boy? Shucked and breaded and fried, made from oysters less than an hour from the water.
Ocean Odyssey is one of the local restaurants we have, and he uses our oysters in everything because he sees the quality of it, and for him, it's worth it.
Chesapeake Bay is one of the world's largest estuaries. It's 200 miles long and as much as 30 miles wide, fed by 150 rivers and streams. That mix of fresh and salt water proved perfect for oysters and oystermen, who've been reaping Chesapeake's waterborne bounty for centuries. But in the last 50 years, population growth brought water pollution and disease. Today, the wild oyster population is less than 1% of what it was in the late 1800s. 20 years ago, some 6,000 oystermen worked these waters. Today, there are fewer than 500.
Oysters are considered a keystone species, which means, it is the linchpin for the health of the bay.
Kevin says oysters are more than just a product. They're an essential part of a healthy ecosystem.
The guys who do this testing will tell you that an adult oyster will filter 50 gallons a day out of the bay. Filtering it, taking the algae out.
Thanks to efforts by dozens of environmental groups, scientists, and government agencies, Chesapeake Bay is slowly getting cleaner. Everyone who enjoys or makes a living from this cherished shellfish shares the same hope, and in small ways, each is doing their part.
Scientific studies have also proved that oysters play a major role in maintaining the ecological balance in the waters they grow. The CMFRI has taken research on oysters a step forward by transferring the oyster farming technology to different self-help groups across the coastal belt of Kerala. CMFRI has now proved that oysters are indeed a health food and that it could be made into an economical, viable food produce.
During the last 5 to 6 years, we have been doing oyster farming, and it was found that this technology can be very beneficially used for the development of women self-help group. One of the advantages of the technology is that it is very simple, it does not require much input, and the tropical condition of our country has helped us to reduce the grow-out period to just 6 to 8 months. And under one project funded by the World Bank called the National Agriculture Innovative Project, the CMFRA has been trying to popularize oyster farming and increase oyster production through farming.
The water should have a salinity of 15 to 35 ppt and should not be polluted. It is best to avoid waters where industries discharge their effluents into the water. The location should have a depth between 1.5 to 3 meters with a mild current. This place is ideal for oyster farming for all these reasons. Is constructed as a simple rack made up of bamboo or casuarina poles. About 25 poles are required to make a 5 by 5 square meter rack. The poles are sharpened at one end and driven into the bottom of the area selected for farming, and more poles are tied horizontally to these poles to form the rack.
Now,
Ideal time for starting a farm is November or December, when spat, the seedlings of oysters, are abundant. Empty oyster shells can be collected from the farms where farming is already over or is ongoing. These empty shells are cleaned and a hole is made in the middle using suitable tools. These are then threaded into a chain of about 1.5 meters with a space of about 20 centimeters between the shells. This chain is called as a wren and each shell is called as a culch. These wrens are prepared by the entire family, especially the women and children, just before the season. Usually, a wren of 1.5 meters will have 5 shells strung on a 4 mm nylon rope. For a 25 square meter rack, like the one we just saw, about 500 wrens are required. These wrens are then shifted to the farming area where racks are already prepared. These wrens are then suspended inside the rack structure at equal distances. Care should be taken that they do not touch the bottom of the river. Within a week into the season, the spat settles into the stringed shell cultures and the farm is ready for cultivation. The spat produces a cement-like substance with which it sticks onto the cultures, and once it is bonded, it cannot detach and will grow and reproduce from the culch itself. The oyster spat filters phytoplankton and other minute organic matter from the surrounding water and grows in length and weight. The advantage in oyster farming is that there is no need to give supplementary feed, since the oysters get the feed from the surrounding water. The spat grows to a harvestable size of 60 to 70 millimeters in 5 to 6 months. Oyster seeds can also be produced in hatcheries. The technique for oyster spat production at hatcheries has been developed and standardized by CMFRI. We are now at one such hatchery in Narakil near Satar Island. The brood stock are collected from the natural bed, cleaned and kept in the conditioning room where the temperature is low. The oysters are fed with mixed algae, and after 2 weeks they are induced to spawn by slowly raising the temperature. The fertilized egg passes through several stages and settles at the bottom after becoming the pedivillager. When the larvae are about to set, cleaned and drilled empty oyster shells are kept for settlement of larvae. After the larva settles on the culch, they are allowed to grow for 1 month in the hatchery itself and then transferred to the farm. Now, let us see how the oysters are harvested. Before harvesting, the condition of the oyster must be checked. One important factor is that if the oyster is spent or already spawned, then the harvest will have to be postponed. Here, we cannot harvest now because of the small size of the oyster. Normally, 5 to 7 months are sufficient for harvesting, but in some cases, due to climatic conditions, oyster growth will be delayed. Let us check another oyster farm which is ready for harvesting. In 5 to 6 months, the spats have grown and reached harvestable sizes. Many spats have attached itself around the original one and it looks like a cluster now. Yes, this is a very good oyster and we can see that the meat occupies the entire cavity of the shell. This indicates that this is the right time to harvest the oyster. The farmer will get maximum profit from these kind of oysters. These oysters are then taken out of the water and shifted into a cleaning area for depuration. Here we have to jet wash the oysters to remove the silt settled over them. Now the oysters are declumped by carefully separating the oysters from their place of attachment. The separated oysters are placed in depuration tanks containing settled, clear, filtered water. Oysters have to be depurated before they are marketed mainly because they are filter feeder. Depuration is the process by which oysters are purified by placing them in good purified seawater for a specific time. The oysters will filter and take in the purified water and their gut will be clear and the bacteria will also be eliminated. Such oysters will be ultra pure. This water used for depuration is pumped to a settlement tank from the nearby estuary. For filtration, the settled water is taken through a series of cartridge filters which will physically remove particles in the water. Then, this water is taken through a UV filter to destroy all the microbes contained in the water, and this water is used for depuration. The depuration tanks should have a slope and the oysters should not touch the bottom.